Tony D and Little Joan, and this is a screenwriter's take on El Conde, otherwise known as the Count, a vampire movie about Augusto Pinochet, the historical figure from Chile, who's actually a 250-year-old vampire. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. Links in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, John. Books 1 through 12. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free, dog. Kindle Unlimited is free. So, Pinochet, the dictator of Chile, who killed the communist. You know, if you've ever heard that meme online about helicopter rides, I believe that refers to Pinochet. And so the premise is Pinochet actually was a vampire. He actually was born in France, and eventually, but he was a soldier, and eventually he took over Chile. So, again, I'm doing my non-spoiler review here. I'm doing my non-spoiler, and then I'll do the spoiler review. So in the trailer, you see that he's sort of lived too long, and he wants to die. And his children kind of want him to die so they can inherit all his money. And there's some other people in the mix too. So it gets it's full of intrigue and complicated relationships. But it plays out kind of like a French movie, because Pinochet himself is really French, Joan. And the movie's in black and white. It's also subtitled. Well, actually, I think I had the subtitles on. It's in English. No, it's subtitled too. It's in English, mostly, and then they also speak Spanish and French, and it kind of plays out like almost like a play, almost like a Greek tragedy in a lot of respects. The ending's very odd. I did not see the ending coming. I kind of expected something different, so it did subvert my expectations, I'll say. Is it good? It's interesting. I find it a fascinating film. Parts of it I really like. Some of it I went, but there were surprises. Definitely surprises. The narrator is eventually revealed, and that was a huge surprise, I'll say. So, yeah. Should you see it? Well, it's on Netflix, so if you have Netflix, it's free. I think it's the sort of movie. First off, it's not a slow-paced movie, but it is. It has a very leisurely pace about it. There's not a lot of action here. It's not a lot of it's not one of those short attention span theater deals. It's not a Russo brothers film where people are getting killed and people are running from place to place. Nothing like that. It's more. It plays out more like a play because there are a lot of characters and they go into them a little bit. The narration really helps. It's one of the few movies that was narrated that I enjoyed the narration part. And then you understand why it's being narrated the way it is towards the end. So, from a screenwriting perspective, I think it's a very interesting screenplay. Yeah, screenwriters, you should probably check this out just because it makes really good use of a narrator. And it has lots of twists that are very nicely paced out through the acts. The first act, it sets up the entire movie, gives you the history. The second act, again, non-spoiler, it's about what's going to happen in a not too distant future. And then the third act, the resolution, really had some wonderful surprises. So, yeah, I would call it a good movie. it's weird. It's very odd. It's quirky. Um, it's surprising. Um, I was definitely in the mood for it, and I think you kind of have to be. It's a slower paced movie, much slower paced. One of the characters is a little annoying. I'll get into that in the non spoiler review, but for the most part, there was a lot of status changes with her. It's a new character that comes in on the second act, and what happens with her, you know, in some moments she's up here, and then she's down here, and it goes back and forth. So a lot of that happens in the movie. You kind of don't know where it's going until the end, and then it's really an odd ending. It's just weird, weird. So yeah, I would say it. If you got Netflix, I think it was, I think you'll like it if you're a movie nut like me. I think you should watch it if you're a screenwriter. I think you'll like it if you like vampire movies. It's a very different vampire movie, and I mean that in a good way. A lot of vampire movies, they're either all action or they're all caught up in the same sort of tropey mythos about vampires, and it just goes on and on. This one has like a different take on it, but the take is kind of cool, kind of makes sense. I couldn't see a sequel, but maybe, I don't think you'd want a sequel in a movie like this, but I did like it a lot. All right, that concludes my non-spoiler review. Let me get into the spoilers. So if you're going to watch this thing, stop it here, go watch it. Otherwise, forge ahead. Okay, so first act, Pinochet, his history, how he became a vampire. And at first, I'm kind of like, well, I guess he wasn't bitten. He's just born a vampire, which I thought was very interesting. I thought it was very interesting how he just kind of becomes one. But that's explained, right, in the final act. So you get the wind up leading to the present day where he just wants to die, he's depressed. You meet his kids and the staff, and it all looks kind of sad, pathetic. Pinochet is already dead to the world at this point in history, which I also found amusing. It's like, okay, he doesn't want to continue. Okay, Joan, I'm going to put you down. Be good, okay? So then the kids come, and they're all anxious to get their money and continue their corrupted lifestyles, which is also interesting. And then, of course, the nun. So the nun character is very interesting because initially they present her, and and they kind of set her up as being very competent, but with all the movies today, I was really worried she was going to girl boss her way through the whole movie, and that was a real worry because every scene with her, she was the one character I found slightly annoying with her interview because they were a little too on point, I felt. And I thought like the characters, they had odd reactions. They like were instantly trusting of her, which was so weird. I didn't quite understand. I kind of understood that they hired her and felt they needed to, but they seemed to trust her way too much, the kids. But they were all sort of equally kind of dopey that way. It was also very interesting how they set up that Pinochet has kids, right? He has kids, and he has a family, unlike most vampires. So that was interesting. They didn't quite explain why his kids don't become vampires, or or at least one of them. But you could kind of understand it because of the revelation in the third act, which is just crazy, right? So you've got the nun, and she's trying to get closer and closer and closer to, she unravels all the secrets, And I guess at some point she's gonna kill him after she gets turned, has sex with him, turns, and then looks like she's gonna finally kill him, and then gets, I don't know, thrown out of the lair. And then the big twist to me was when they kill her. I mean, that was a big twist because I thought she was going to girl boss her way through the movie, and I was like, oh. But then it was sort of like, because he dressed her up as Marie Antoinette, right? It was like, oh, okay, here's Marie Antoinette getting killed again. So that was very interesting. Lucia, his wife, his current wife, I'll say, was interesting. This guy was very interesting too. And then how he dies, with Pinochet cutting his head off. But of course, the character that surprises everybody in this movie, I think, and again, there's huge spoilers, is the narrator when she shows up. I don't even think they have a shot at her because they wouldn't. So the mother of Pinochet shows up, and it turns out it's Margaret Thatcher. I mean, that was just crazy. Margaret Thatcher is the mother of Pinochet, and it gets very creepy when she talks about their relationship, right? Like they're gonna run away together, and you think it's gonna be like, oh, that's odd. Why are you gonna run away together? That's gross. Like, are you guys a couple? You're his mother, but they're vampires. So you could, in some respects, that makes sense, right? Because they're vampires are gross, disgusting, hedonistic, degenerates. When you get right down to it. So, and then that ending, where they eat the vampire's hearts, and he becomes super young, and then he becomes a kid again, and she just is his mother. I mean, that was crazy ending. I did not see that coming. Very strange. And they keep all the money. Very strange indeed. So, I'm not sure what it says about anything. Initially with the nun, I was kind of following it like it was about corruption. She's gonna undo all this corruption and give the money to the church, and that just doesn't happen. And then at one point, I thought when the nuns were coming, I thought, the nuns are going to catch up to him. Nope. So, I'm not sure what the point of the movie is. When he just decides, I'll become young. It's like he doesn't get his comeuppance. Nobody does, really. Except Fyodor, maybe. And Lucia. The nun, I don't exactly understand what the nun's plan was. Right? So what was the nun's plans? Was she planning to kill him? I mean, did she seduce him so she could get closer and kill him? It seemed like she was, and Fyodor just stops her. It's just odd. It's like, why didn't she use her vampire powers to fly away? If the goal was to get all the money for the church, why didn't she just take off earlier? She didn't have to, I guess she attacked Pinochet, was unsuccessful, and then had to flee, I guess was the order of the day. It didn't quite come across to me. It's weird how they did it. The narration helped that along a little bit. The narration was pretty helpful. It felt a lot like a movie from the 1940s in some respects, because it was in black and white, and because it was so leisurely paced. I felt I got to know these characters, and although I didn't feel like it came to a conclusion, maybe I had to think about it more. I still kind of enjoyed it. I enjoyed the idea. I enjoyed the Pinochet trying to gear up, right? He was letting himself die, and now he has to kill a bunch of people and drink their blood and eat their hearts in order to get more powerful. And then he slowly starts to come back, and with each death, he gets a little stronger. I thought that was kind of interesting, but I was kind of waiting for a big payoff, and it kind of never comes, right? So, for the most part, strong performances. Odd. Everything about this movie is odd, but I kind of liked it. I don't know why. I can't really pinpoint it. Maybe it's just because I'm nostalgic for black and white movies. I don't know. I kind of just enjoyed watching a movie that didn't leave me exhausted mentally, you know? And it was kind of, I can't say it was pleasant, but it was interesting to watch because I really didn't know what was going to happen, you know? So there were a lot of twists and turns. Lucia getting bit, that was a twist. The nun was, lots of twists with her. At first, she's recruited, and you think, oh, she's going to be dead. And then she gets there, and then it's like, she's interrogating everybody, and everybody's listening to her. I'm like, what? Then that scene with Fyodor nearly bites her, and she breaks down in tears. That was a really interesting scene. And then she seduces the Count, and I thought, oh, she's going to kill him now. And that was kind of interesting. Her status, like, sort of peaked there. And then when the Count kind of, like, kicks her out of his lair, and Fyodor captures her, then you realize, okay, she's in over her head. She really was. And then when he kills her, it's like, oh, okay. Guess she wasn't girl boss. So I gotta say, that was kind of refreshing. It was kind of refreshing to see a female character fail. I mean, she kind of just fails in her mission. Kind of. You know, she and when you think about it, she really taints herself. She makes this huge sacrifice just to get at the vampire, tainting her own soul, her own immortal soul, and then she fails anyway. So it's kind of a tragedy. Now the ending with Margaret Thatcher just comes out of left field. I'm like, Margaret Thatcher? Like, when she first appears on the screen, I'm like, that kind of looks like Margaret Thatcher, but it can't be her. And then I was like, wait a minute, she sounds like her. And then like, the longer she's on screen, I'm just kind of like, is this Margaret Thatcher? And then, boom, she drops the bomb. So that was just weird. But, again, I kind of liked it. I kind of liked the weird ending, because it just kind of, like, ends. This weird, like, well, they're going to keep being vampires in their own weird way. They seem to ignore the rules of vampires. Didn't seem to be bothered by sunlight. They could fly across the water. Yeah. So it was more about, and that made it kind of interesting in that it was more about the character of Pinochet and his thoughts and his feelings, and not all his crazy vampire powers. Like, those were almost superfluous. So, and then, of course, Margaret Thatcher's explanation, how she got pregnant, she got raped, and then got turned into a vampire. So then she gives up the kid, Pinochet, and next thing you know, he later in life kind of turns into a vampire. I think it makes perfect sense that he could walk around in the sunlight because he's a day walker. I can use the term from Blade. But it kind of doesn't make sense for her. And then I'm kind of like, okay, so Margaret Thatcher's still alive, still wearing the same outfits. Like, where's she been all this time? But, I mean, it just came out of left field. I'm just like, oh my God, it's Margaret Thatcher. So, I'm not so sure what really the message was supposed to be. I like the anti-communist message. I like that part. The part where, like, Pinochet is complaining nobody appreciates him, and he killed all those communists. Like, the communists are like so low on the totem pole in this movie. I love that part. I just absolutely love it, because it's just like, of course he killed the communists. He's not a monster. He's a vampire. Of course, communists are worse than vampires. Come on. That was kind of the attitude of the movie, which I found very amusing. So yeah, I think it's a kind of a fascinating study and a different kind of movie. You know, performance is strong, pretty much all the way around. The nun, I don't know. She was a little. On some respects, I guess they were kind of going for that 40s vibe of a character who's a little too energetic, like an old studio actor, you know. Hey, how you doing? 23 skidoo, that kind of thing. And that worked. It worked because it was a black and white movie, and the other characters were that way too, especially the other kids. They all had distinct personalities, which I really appreciated. They had like slightly different variations on what they should do in terms of the money and their dad and their mom. And I like that, you know, Pinochet was going to kill his own kids. Again, he's a monster, but he's not a monster. So it was very interesting. So, yeah, I think this is an interesting screenplay. You know, it's got a completely different vibe. You know, it does have a lot of stuff happens in the third act. It builds to that. It feels a lot like a play. You know, in sensibility. I mean, they could actually do this as a play. I think it would work. Again, the ending is it's just odd. It doesn't really, I don't know if it really ties into much. Other than, if you know what it feels like to me, I used to play the old vampire games. You know, vampire LARPing and all the White Wolf stuff. It feels like the origin of a vampire. A very complicated, convoluted origin. With some added bonuses of, like, you know, special vampire powers that explain everything that happens to them. So, yeah, El Conde. I mean, I think he could do a lot worse than this movie. So, I think if you're going for that kind of vibe, that kind of play vibe, character-driven thing, I mean, I think this is a good movie to look at, because, again, the payoff at the end really is not much of a payoff, but the journey is, I don't know, I felt it was entertaining. Am I crazy? Anyhow, it's El Conde, now playing on Netflix. Watch it before it goes off, I would say. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more base takes. I will not, repeat, not be at the Greenwich Artisan Fair today, because the big storm, it postponed the entire weekend. I got nothing going on, so I'll be around and making videos. So hope to see you in the next one. We'll see you in the next one.